This is just a snippet of a longer conversation I had with Max Kelker of the American Institute on Economic Research on the topic of the Gospel of Jesus' Wife Forged Fragment. If you want to watch the whole video, it is available right here on the History of the Papacy YouTube, which you can find links to all in the description below. So just to set the frame of what we're talking about today, how did one of the most important and well-regarded professors in New Testament and religious studies get to this point in September of 2012, where she put out this document? She kind of did it in a half academic, half sensationalistic way. How did we get to this point? And how did a system that was really supposed to prevent this sort of sensationalized Indiana Jones style archaeological finds, how did it just fail so spectacularly? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Max, maybe what were you thinking when you just originally heard this story, and even before you started digging into it, what were you thinking?
So I think to me the first real area of significance that this brings out a little bit from experience is the point where academia and the media intersect. And, you know, as you said, Karen King makes this announcement at this symposium in Rome. Now, I'm not familiar with other things that have been announced at these symposia in Rome, you know, each year. So why do we know about this? This turns out to be very important because Karen King had called a few major media news outlets but to cover this announcement. And she was doing it for a finding that was written up in a journal article that had either not yet been peer-reviewed, which is usually in academia when a journal article is published, you have even double-blind peer reviewers from these journals out there. You know, people say, what's the significance of these journals anymore when you have the web? Why do you need things published? Well, it's this curation, and it's people in your own field are supposed to, you know, basically say, is this a good paper? Is this correct? And is this, you know, interesting enough to publish? The irony, and this relates to some more recent developments in the relationship between academia and the media, is if you want something really reviewed by your peers and everybody else really closely, the best way to do it is to call up the New York Times and say, have I got a story for you, before you do any of it. I have seen this again and again across fields, like several times, including several in my own. When people go to the media with major discoveries before they go through this peer review process, the peer review process is not sacred. It can be deeply problematic, but the people doing the review get ticked off. And it also becomes a big story. And because of all of the incentives involved, other people like you and me end up hearing about it. Now, maybe this is something to circle back to at the end, but you know, you said, how did this system not work? Maybe this is how the system works at this point. But with the other point I wanted to make about academia and the media, and again, this is not that academia in its own bubble is sacred and infallible, nor should it, nor could it be. But that said, if I'm giving my findings to the media, if I'm doing research that mass media, social media, anything from the public is interested in, which I should be, by the way, people, you know, I should be thinking about sort of important things. When I give that work over to the media, I can tell myself I'm telling them how to properly use it, right? King, in this case, says, you know, very eloquently in this interview, this does not mean Jesus had a wife. Of course, this means some people a few hundred years later thought Jesus had a wife, right? But why are we all interested in it? At least me, it's the Jesus and the wife thing, right? Why is this the religious story I end up reading all the books about and talking to you about? You know, this is stuff that sort of captures the public's imagination. once academic questions are in the media, they're going to be simplified, misused, part of debates. And we sign a permission slip when we do that. And I think there was either some intentional naivete or not from Karen King about how this was going to be used, how this was going to be talked about. Again, another irony, there's too many ironies to count in this whole thing, but another irony is that by making it interesting to people, it got a lot of other people interested and probably brought a lot of facts to the whole process at the end that wouldn't have been if the media wasn't involved. So it's a very interesting and complicated story.
I think that's maybe that's the first thread we'll follow, because a lot of these things are kind of threads that go in parallel with each other. The big themes in this, and one theme I think is, and we may get it out of the way, is Karen King and this how this became sensationalized, and she kind of wanted to. My feeling was she wanted to have her cake and eat it too. That she wanted to portray herself as an academic that was just going to follow the truth, and she realized that this wasn't a slam dunk, that that Jesus had a wife. But she kind of put it out there in the media that way, that this was an earth-shattering document, that it wasn't just a credit card-sized fragment of papyrus. You know, she definitely put it out there that this was more than just something that was of interest, of minor interest to Coptic scholars. And her naivete was maybe not maybe as naive as we think it is, that she was playing two sides of the field, that she was just the academic following the truth, but also that, oh, this is a earth-shattering document.
I think I've characterized this to you in our conversations as kind of all too common in academia, and yet perhaps a particularly egregious and particularly a high-profile case of it. When we do things, and academic questions are always hard in a sense, or should be like that. That's why people are sucking up big endowments to sit there working on them. And as an economist, when we do academic work on policy issues, there's always a million unanswered questions and everything. But people are going to ask us, does the minimum wage reduce employment, and by how much, or what kind of monetary system should we have? And we're not going to give them the 60 pages of footnotes, and we are going to give them answers. And that happens. The problem is this statement that gets kicked around way too easily, which is we have to do our best. We gotta do something. And at times we have to be, instead of erring on the side of giving a simple answer, we have to err on the side of we don't know. They don't want the complicated answer, but we have to, we have to be the stewards of it. Now, Karen King essentially got this papyrus, and it's very interesting as you're reading yet another layer in this, as Ariel Sabar and his kind of perception of Karen King. It sounds like, I think an extremely interesting thing that he said was about the Da Vinci Code. So several years before this, Karen King kind of gained some prominence from the Da Vinci Code, right? She had been writing about these Gnostic Gospels and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene going back decades. But the original kind of History Channel documentaries that got made in the wake of the Da Vinci Code, Karen King is interviewed, and she's and Ariel Sabar, the author of Virtutes, says that what Dan Brown has said is obviously not true. There's a lot of inaccuracies in it. That she's not necessarily, she's kind of encouraging this stuff. And he says Karen King's whole career has been about dispelling fictions about Mary Magdalene. The problem she's confronted with is this particular fiction happens to coincide, happens to give her a platform to tell a different but related story that she's been spending her whole career trying to tell.
Thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon. Join us there to support the show. Make sure you click like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.